Okay, we are pleased to be joined by DraftKings Sportsbooks, Danny Avello. He's the Director of Race and Sports Operations at DraftKings. Johnny, really appreciate you taking the time to join John and I this afternoon.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right, we want to start with this. Do you think you have the greatest job of all time? And part two, how did you get the greatest job of all time?
I do believe I have the greatest job of all time. And the reason I'll tell you that I do is that most people, when they go to work, they look at their watch to find out what time it is so that they can go home at that particular time. They look forward to going home. I haven't looked at my watch for over 40 years.
Good. That is ideal. Were you a big gambler before you got into this? Like how does one even, get to this point? Obviously you've worked in Las Vegas for many years. You were the Wynn Las Vegas Sportsbook Director for over a decade. But I mean, how did you break into the industry? And is this kind of where you ultimately saw yourself ending up?
No, not really. When I look at my youth, you asked me if I was a gambler. Never a professional gambler, but I've been around horse racing since I was 5 years old, and I actually did make bets with the bookie when I was 15 years old. So I've been around the game a while. I went to Las Vegas not for race and sports wagering, but for casino wagering. I could deal all the games, and I worked in the table games area for 6 years before I migrated over to the sports book. But once I moved over to the sports book, then I kind of found my wheelhouse and where I really belonged.
So, Johnny, having worked in Las Vegas, I mean, so many things have changed over the course of just the last few years in terms of state-by-state legislation when it comes to sports gambling. So what was your thought in making the leap and going away from the traditional Las Vegas casino sportsbook over to the DraftKings space? Were you worried at all about taking this leap of faith? Did you feel like this was something that you knew you'd be able to steer in the right direction? What was that process like, leaving the Wynn?
Well, if we backtrack about 5 years ago, and prior to that, I never thought that sports wagering would be legal across the U.S. I thought it would strictly stay in Las Vegas because there were a lot of hurdles there. And I wasn't sure that those hurdles could be overcome. But I wanted to get into the space if it ever did happen. And so when one of the owners of DraftKings, Matt Kalish, recruited me, and him and I had probably 3 or 4 meetings, I decided that it's something that I certainly want to entertain because I knew it was going to be big. I knew it was going to expand, and I just couldn't see not being a part of it. So I left the traditional brick and mortars, as you call it, and got into this space, which I've enjoyed immensely so far.
So obviously with DraftKings, you're focusing more on the sportsbook side of things, but I think a lot of people know DraftKings from the incessant commercials 3-4 years ago that were really trying to push daily fantasy sports. How much familiarity did you have with the DFS space versus the sportsbook space? Like, had you used DraftKings even, or how did they kind of pitch it to you as something that was really going to be big for the future?
Well, DraftKings actually was not in the state of Nevada, so I didn't have the luxury of being able to use the DFS app. I knew something about DFS. And I've actually played in fantasy leagues going back 30 years, so I'm familiar with how they work. Now, DraftKings has taken DFS to a different level, and there was a lot for me to learn. And I'm still learning it, and I really enjoy that side of it. So DraftKings is more of, encompasses a lot of entertainment, and it's not only the DFS, it's sports, and a casino, which I am familiar with, and there's more to come.
Absolutely. And, with like the digital space that the DraftKings Sportsbook works with, and obviously the physical one as well, have you noticed that DraftKings has had an advantage in maybe cornering a new market that might not have been as popular at traditional walk up to the counter sports bets? Like, I'm more specifically talking about, like, has this DraftKings opportunity like opened up more for, say, player props and in-game wagering and that sort of thing to take off?
Well, the retail aspect of betting is very important because not everybody wants to bet on the mobile app and digitally. They like going into an establishment. They like that camaraderie of whether it be the writers or others who visit that establishment and watching games in that environment. But the digital is really where it's at. I mean, it allows you to the luxury to bet at your own speed. It allows you to bet the luxury of when speed is important. And you mentioned in-game wagering because that moves rather quickly. But digital has taken sports betting to new heights. And I think without digital, this industry would not have grown the way it has.
So having now worked on both sides, are you at all concerned that they can both exist long term? I mean, if DraftKings kind of gets to where it wants to be, I think 20, 30 years down the road, maybe you have DraftKings brick and mortar locations, but is the goal to kind of bring people out of the traditional, flying with your buddies out to Las Vegas, placing some bets, kind of that experience that you get, that classic Vegas sportsbook experience? Are you concerned at all that maybe that'll fade away in the future, if and when DraftKings continues to take off?
Well, you said 30 or 40 years, so I'm not concerned about that far down the road. But, right now, the retail locations are very important to us. And we have a whole team that works on retail locations. And I'm part of that team for opening in new jurisdictions. The retail books we have are doing really well. We're very proud of them. And we're looking at opening more this year and years to come. So retail is not dead. 40 years down the road, I can't tell you guys, I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah, absolutely. The times they certainly are changing, and this year I think has presented maybe the most unique challenge you could possibly be presented with. I mean, with everything that's gone on, and that has in a way shifted the viability. I mean, as if it wasn't already heading in that direction one way or the other, but I feel like the digital space and not having to physically go into the sports book in a year where the pandemic has really altered the way that everyone behaves and wants to go about things. So I mean, how much in a year like this, how interesting is it to you that you've been in a field that is almost like gone up, as not necessarily profiting off of it, but just like been able to more than just stay afloat through all of this?
Well, in a year like this, certainly the digital has helped immensely because there are times where people weren't able to go into a retail location because they were closed at times. But they figured out ways how to stay open and how to protect their employees. But, we just had a remarkable year. And it's not only because the digital that helped, but it's also because we have a great team and we offer great products and we're expanding those products and we're going to continue to expand those products. We have great customer service and it, the reasons for betting on a DraftKings platform or being part of DraftKings are they're just great. And I just love being a part of it and working around all these so-called young people with young ideas. I'm the old guy on the staff, guys. I'm 68 years old, but for the most part, the average age for DraftKings employees is about 28, 30 years old. And the ideas that the team continuously comes up with and the promotions they continuously put out there are just totally outrageous. And I don't have to tell you guys that because you see them because, you follow the app itself. But things are just going to get better and I'm just glad to be a part of it.
So you just said it, Johnny. Guys like John and I, are we work with DraftKings day in and day out at RotoWire. So we're not really the target audience as far as when DraftKings talks about expanding its business. What is the key to eventually making sports betting as commonplace in the United States as fantasy football? I have aunts, my mom, my dad, uncles who really don't follow sports. but play fantasy football and get really into it every year. They don't feel that way about sports betting. Is the goal to eventually, normalize it to the point where, much like fantasy football, you can kind of just jump in and you don't have to feel like, you're swimming in a pool of sharks?
Well, first of all, fantasy football is alive and well, doing very well, and having some of its best years ever since sports came on board. And I think the reason for that is that there's a crossover. There are some sports bettors that play fantasy and some fantasy players that bet sports. No, you're right. There are people who do like fantasy and will continue to play fantasy and maybe have no interest in betting sports. But there's a whole market out there of people who've been betting sports for years, having to travel to Las Vegas or betting with illegal bookies. And those people will now have the opportunity to bet with a platform like DraftKings, where there are just so many more options and it's so easy to do. And as we grow and go into more states, there'll be new sports players, maybe who have never bet a sports bet in their life. But once they see how much fun it is and how entertaining it is, we'll try it and we'll be part of the team of people who bet sports, not on a daily basis, but for entertainment purposes.
Absolutely, absolutely. So definitely excited about the direction there. So we've kind of established that, the NFL is king, of course, but from where you're sitting, is there, maybe not a sleeping giant is the right way to put it, but in terms of like the next frontier, a certain sport or a certain way of wagering, one way or the other, that you think could really pick up some traction here as we move forward?
Well, there's your core sports, and those core sports are going to be your top betting sports. Your football, your basketball, which encompasses both pro and college, and then baseball. Hockey does okay. I consider that one of the core sports, but there's other sports now who have gained a lot of momentum or doing as well as hockey, golf, and even NASCAR, and all these other auxiliary sports out there that we offer, table tennis and darts, and it goes on and on, the extensive menu that we have. And that menu will continue to expand. Now, in-game wagering is kind of in its infancy, to be honest with you, although that handle is growing quite quickly. But there's always going to be new offerings, and new offerings will be real-time offerings on golf. Like, and we've done some of this already. Will the next shot, hit the fairway? Will there be a birdie on this hole by a particular player? Baseball, balls and strikes. And so we're becoming more innovative with the in-game wagering. And, I can't tell you some of the things we're going to do because they haven't been invented yet. But I can tell you that on a daily basis, the team is coming up with new ideas, which I have never encountered before. And they're going to be mainstream at some point.
So maybe this time around, I won't ask you to look 40 years into the future, but 5-10 years into the future, what is the future of the DraftKings Sportsbook? I remember 2 or 3 years ago, when the NBA really kind of started to buy in with DraftKings and FanDuel and really promoting DFS, which is something that we hadn't seen a lot of other sports do. There was talk of, there'll be a kiosk in every NBA arena, and, you can leave your seat, you could go place a bet in the arena right there, or you could do it on your phone as you're watching the game. Obviously some of that has come to fruition, but over the next few years, how far do you see that advancing?
Well, those type of things are going to continue to happen. But if you noticed, if you follow DraftKings, you'll notice every day there's a new announcement that we are now joined at the hip with this team or that team, or, we're supporting some type of drone racing or something. And so you're going to continue to see some of these new offerings. Like I told you before, I can't tell you some of the things that have come down the pike, but if there was a show when I was younger called The Jetsons, did you guys ever see that?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the Jetsons did some things that we were all like, yeah, sure. But some of those things are now happening, electric cars and, ways to communicate with each other without actually having being hardwired in. So the world's changing, and it's changing fast, and we're changing with it.
So
Yes,
sorry, John, I have one quick follow-up on that. Putting yourself in your shoes from, let's say, 20 years ago, when you're working in the more traditional sportsbook environment, did you ever imagine a day where an NBA team would be coming to you looking to partner, with a site or a company, that's openly into gambling? Is that, obviously the NBA has completely done a 180 on that. Is that anything that you really saw coming in the future?
No, I didn't, because at one time, some of these sports, the NBA, NFL, they were almost like a reverse magnet,
Right.
We just did not mesh. But it's to a point now where we are working together.
And that's been a great development to kind of, bring it to the mainstream and demystify certain things about it and let everyone know that that is something that can be for everybody. And looking towards the expansion, we're starting to see state by state legislation go the way that we want it to as far as the sports betting space is concerned. So is this something where we could see one day in the not too distant future, all 50 states be having that capability of being to do legal sports betting within their borders, or could there be some potential hangups along the way?
I think eventually every state gets there. It'll take some time for all the states to get there, but there's already some things happening with the intermingling of those states. We offered a football contest this year that crossed over a couple of states, and we already know next year it's going to cross over many more states. So those are commingling pools, and that's a way to grow a contest like our Pro Pick'em contest was what it was called. So we're looking for next year for when you do that, you take multiple states and you can use all the people that live in those states to be combined in one particular pool. It's going to be a heck of a contest next year, guys. But to have all 50 involved in something like that, it's going to take some time because there are some states that are still opposed to it, and it'll take them a while to come around.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, we're in one of those states in Wisconsin here. Have you found that there's one primary impetus for these states that have kind of been dragging their feet? Like what is ultimately holding them back? And, is there one thing, or is it from state to state, they each have their own reasons?
Just not enough information. Probably thinking old school, thinking about some of the old bad things that could have happened. But once they actually sit down and speak to a regulator, and we are highly regulated, they realize that this business is, so controlled, so on the up and up. We do everything right. We look out for the interest of bettors and every other possible compliance that you can follow. So I just think it's just not knowledgeable enough yet.
And like you said, that will get there with time. Zooming back out, I just want to talk to you about Vegas right now. We have the Thursday night game there. Last night in Vegas, you had this brand new crown jewel of a stadium out in Vegas where the Raiders play, and we're not to the point yet where we can have fans there, but I mean, how much electricity is that going to bring to the city of Las Vegas once, we're past it and we're able to pack out that stadium out in the desert?
Well, I know you guys are familiar with our hockey team, the Golden Knights.
Of course.
And that is such a popular event in town each and every night that they play here in town. The arena's packed. The surrounding area around the arena is packed. And it has been since day one. This year, of course, we weren't able to have hockey after March, and so therefore, those guys played in a bubble. But that didn't stop people from hanging out in that area. And we're finding the same where the Raiders play because the fans are showing up, but they're not able to actually go inside the stadium. So they're making a presence and they're rooting on the team. and just to show their support. But that thing would have been packed this year, guys, and look for that to be a tough ticket to get when they go live again next year. There's going to be a lot of other events there too besides the NFL. There's going to be some college games there. There's probably going to be some college bowl games as well as concerts. So that's a state-of-the-art indoor-outdoor arena that's going to be utilized quite frequently.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you're still living in Las Vegas, correct?
I am. I live in Henderson, which is just on the outskirts. I've been in Las Vegas for 41 years.
Okay. So John and I have been out there several times. RotoWire does a company trip each summer. We love being out there, but I have to say, usually after 3 or 4 days, I am more than ready to hop on what's usually like an 11:30 p.m. flight and just get back to Milwaukee, get home, take a few days to recover. What is it like actually living in Las Vegas full time?
Well, it's wonderful. First of all, the weather's great. Summers are a little hot. You have to get used to those summers. And I'll tell you a quick story about those summers. When I first came to town back in '79, I drove into town with a car where the door had to be tied. And I did not have any air conditioning when I came to town. And so that car eventually broke down, and I bought another car, which also did not have air conditioning. So for my first 3 or 4 years in town, I was driving around through these summers with no air. That's not the case now, guys. I'm a wimp. I really need to have that air, and I need to have that air going, at full tilt. But the question overall for Vegas, it's a great town. I've met some of my best friends here, customers who I've stayed in touch with my entire career, and the community it's a great community that just supports the Vegas area in many, many different ways. As far as living here, you certainly have access to great casinos and great sports books, as well as great places to eat and great shows. So I highly recommend it.
Yes. And, to your point, like one of my favorite things when we go out there, and it's almost like I always forget about it until we are actually physically on the scene there, but the food is always just like so next level. It's always so top notch. All the offerings, all the crazy buffets are like beyond what I could have even like dreamed of. So yeah, definitely with you there. Looking elsewhere, so we've seen an NFL team now come to Vegas. We've seen the hockey team, the Golden Knights. Obviously, they made the Stanley Cup final their first year in existence. What an awesome story that was. Is there any potential around the city that for another major sports team to potentially call Vegas its home?
I think so. The NBA was talked about. Now, we're going back quite a few years, but Mayor Goodman, the man, Mayor Goodman, who was our mayor, his wife's now our mayor. Between the two of them, I think they've been the mayor like 20 years. He was trying to bring in an NBA team at one time, and there wasn't a lot of support for it. I guess the feeling was there was so much in town here that why would people go to an NBA game when we have all these other offerings, all the things you and I just spoke about. And at the time, the town was probably only about 1 million people. Well, now the town's at about 2.5 million people. So I think there is room for an NBA team. I think there's also room for a Major League Baseball team. We have a AAA team here that does very well. They actually play in a new stadium on the west side of town in Summerlin. So I think there's room for both of those, and I think eventually it'll probably happen.
All right, John, I want to finish out with a few fun questions, a little more lighthearted, some to do with sports, others just about kind of some of your personal experiences. What is the craziest thing that you've ever seen happen in all your years at a sportsbook?
Oh, boy. There's many.
Feel free to answer with as many as you want.
I've had a guy come in on the counter and bet $200,000 on a game and in a bag of money, and the bag had a total of about $450,000 in it. He bet the $200,000 and forgot that he left the bag at the counter.
As one does.
Walked out of the book. Somebody stole the bag, and we were able to, through our security and the Metro, the local enforcement to find that gentleman somewhere about 10 miles out from the place where he made the bet. So I got so many stories, guys. It's amazing the things that have happened to me while existing in this town.
Yeah, I can't count the number of times I've accidentally left $200,000 just sitting around. Don't you just hate when that happens?
Yeah, you got to quit that habit, dude.
Oh man! All right, so you said you came to Vegas in the late '70s. One, where are you from originally? And two, what were your favorite sports teams or players growing up that really kind of got you into this business?
I am from a great town 60 miles north of New York City called Poughkeepsie, New York. I spent the first 24 years of my life there. I went to school there. And I've been out in Las Vegas now the last 44 years or so. I've been here. I've still 2 towns that I've lived in, my youth there and the rest of my life here. What sports? I played every sport. I played basketball. I played some football, not at a higher level because obviously I was only 5'7", 150 pounds. But I did play a lot of basketball and baseball in my day. My teams that I root for are the New York Mets. I'm a big Met fan. I'm a big New York Giant fan. I root for those teams even though they've had some tough times as of late. But we've also won some championships with those teams, and there's been some exciting days there. I love that area in Poughkeepsie. It's a great town. I don't know if you ever visited, but it's right on the Hudson River, and I do visit it at least once a year.
So Nick and I, like we mentioned, we are pseudo, Vegas pros. I would say, or not even pros, but we're like Vegas newbies. But we've been a few times. For you as a seasoned vet, what would you, if you could map out what an ideal night out in Vegas on the Strip would look like? How would that set up?
Okay, you would probably do gambling during the day, and gambling would be to play some 21, play some craps, and have a few bets on sports. Then you would go back to your room and get yourself about an hour and a half of rest period. And rest period is kind of just relaxing, sitting down, watching the TV, whether it's news or maybe a sporting event, and unwinding over a glass of wine. Then going down to one of the restaurants that we have to offer, which are many, and find a place to your liking. After that, have a after dinner drink. That'll bring you to about 10:30, 11 o'clock. Visit one of the great clubs in town. Dance the night away till about 3 or 4 in the morning. If you're with a person of the opposite sex, you're going to have time with that person. If you're not, there's a good chance that you'll find a new person of the opposite sex to continue that night with. And it would just be a great day in Vegas with very little sleep.
All right, so this is a more sportsbook focused question. What is the deal when you walk by or when you walk in, you're just hanging out, and almost always, no matter what book you're at, there's a grouping of TVs that have closed circuit, Chariot horse racing. There appear to be no fans watching this. There's usually a group of foreign looking men in tracksuits, shouting at the TVs. What is the deal with these races? How are they organized? Are they run only for gambling purposes? I've always wondered about these.
I believe you're speaking about harness racing, correct?
Very possibly, yes.
Harness racing is racing that is not with the jockey on the back, but with the rider, as he's called,
yes,
in the sulky.
Right.
And they run around the track. There's a starting gate that takes them around the track twice on a half-mile track, once on a mile track. Guys, I have a love for that sport. That's one of the sports that I actually broke my teeth on for gambling on horse racing many, many years ago. So I still have a love for that sport. And the guys that are watching it are yelling at the screen. Yes, they are. They're yelling for their horse to win. they don't realize that the horse cannot hear them, but they don't care because they think they're rooting their horse to victory lane.
I mean, I do the same thing with the Baltimore Ravens every Sunday or Monday. They can't hear me, but it does not stop me from yelling at the TV. My last question for you, Johnny, is in regards to, from the chair that you're sitting in and your knowledge of the public betting market versus the sharps and all of that, how much does that influence when it comes to drawing interest on teams like the Yankees, the Cowboys, the Dodgers, the Lakers? Like, how big of a fish are they in the sense that, that they are going to draw a fair amount of the public money?
You're talking about sophisticated bettors, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, sophisticated bettors, and the reason they're called that is because they do it for a living, most of them. And what they do is they try to get the best possible betting spread or number, whatever you'd like to call it, consistently. And that's important to them because every time the line moves and they don't get the best number, that will cost them money. For the casual bettor, it's important and you should try to do that, but it's not quite as important as it is to these guys. They're market movers, they're line movers. I've known a lot of those guys my entire career. They're good at what they do. And, they're a whole different aspect to sports betting. Not everybody can do that. First of all, you need a pretty good sized bankroll and you've got to have the guts to do it because those guys go into some bad streaks too. They go into streaks where they don't win for an entire month sometimes or weeks or months. And so over time it works for them, but they have their bad times also. So it's risky. It takes guts and it takes a lot of knowledge.
All right, Johnny, my final question has to do with the process of actually setting lines. And we'll use NFL as an example. How has that process changed, with the integration of, more and more computer technology, more and more advanced numbers, predictive analysis? How has that changed? Let's say you go into a given Sunday and, the Packers are 7-point favorites over the Dolphins, but midway through the week, you learn that Devontae Adams is doubtful and Aaron Jones might not play. Like, what is the actual process of deciding whether or not to move that line? And if so, by how much?
Well, starting off with the initial line, the algorithms certainly take a big part in it now, and computer crunching. I've done it the old-fashioned way, also going back 40 years, where I still have a set of power ratings on every team, and I still do it that way. But it's more involved now, and just to kind of break it down in a way where it's not confusing. If a team like the Buffalo Bills have a power rating of, say, call it 94 out of 100, and a team like the Denver Broncos have a power rating of call it 89 out of 100, right there, that's a 5-point spread. And then you throw in your home field advantage. What is that home field advantage? For the Broncos, it might be 1 point right now, maybe 1.5 points. And that's kind of your starting point. And now you have to look at all those other intangibles that you spoke of. Who's not playing in the game? How much is that person worth? And you apply that to your number, and that's how you come up with your opening line. What makes a game move during the course of a week? A lot of factors. Those sharp bettors that we spoke of, those are guys that move the line. Injuries that take place during the line that we did not know about or that happened during the week during practice, they move the line. And in this environment we're in right now, COVID takes precedent in moving lines and taking games off the board. So it's about a whole trading team watching these things closely and making those adjustments.
All right, Johnny, we'll leave you on this note. We're going to put you on the spot real quickly. Give us your Super Bowl matchup and Super Bowl winner as of right now, heading into Week 15.
Well, the Chiefs are, I think, the best team in football. So I'm going to think that the Chiefs are going to get to the championship game again. if they don't get there, my two outsiders to get there would be the Buffalo Bills and the Indianapolis Colts. They would be my outsiders. I just don't think the Steelers are playing well enough, and we'll get there this year. On the other side, Green Bay and the Saints are certainly your two favorites, but there's some others that could make some noise too. The Rams, the Seahawks, and even possibly a team like the Buccaneers. So I'm going to go with the Chiefs and the Packers in the Super Bowl. The Chiefs will probably be a 4-point favorite in a game like that. And who's going to win it? Your guess is as good as mine.
I think I'd have to go with the Chiefs. I mean, I'm essentially a converted Packers fan at this point, being born and raised in Wisconsin. But I mean, the Chiefs have reached a point right now that it's just, you never feel like they're ever going to lose a game. And with Patrick Mahomes being 24, 25, I feel like this is going to continue for the next decade.
Well, he certainly can bring a team from behind. He showed that last year in the playoffs, and he can certainly win a game for you in the waning moments of a game when they need a score. So he's a good guy to have on your team. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnny, once again, I really, really appreciate the time. This has been awesome, and we look forward to hopefully talking to you again in the future.
Thank you for having me on, guys, and enjoy the weekend.
All right, you too. All right, that was awesome. Really, really, really appreciate it, man.
Hi, fans. Please like our video and subscribe to the RotoWire channel. Then please go to rotowire.com/pod for a free 10-day trial.